Parents who have disowned or genuinely stopped loving your child. What happened? Story 1. I was a kid and my sister was much older when my parents were finally done with her. From my recollection, she went through the cycle of making one stupid decision after another, even when they would tell her and show her why she shouldn't have made that decision. Dropped out of college they were paying for, and used the tuition money she was refunded to buy a Freebird, then quit her job. Let the car run out of oil, kept driving until the engine seized up. Parents bailed her out again, buying her what they could afford on one salary, a decent used station wagon. Only catch, parents come home one day to find a strange car in the driveway, a Sunbird. It was old and crummy, but it was a 1-1 trade. Sister managed to swing on the station wagon. Lo and behold, old and crummy car breaks down almost immediately, and she simply stopped showing up to work, gets fired from the job my dad called in favors for. Moves out with no car and no job, accusing parents of controlling her life, moves back in 3 months. Upset that I've moved into her old bedroom, which is bigger. Demands to be moved back into bigger bedroom. Parents say no. She threatens to move out. She goes on a semi-hunger strike about the bedroom. Turns out she was shoplifting and stockpiling candy to eat so she wouldn't have to eat with the rest of the family. During this time, dates a number of less-than-stellar boyfriends, including a guy who is 30 years older, but drives a Porsche. A guy who had been convicted of sexual abuse, and another guy who genuinely creeps everyone out by jumping the fence and just standing in the backyard at all hours of the night. Eventually, she is told to pay rent, go to college, or move out. She chooses to move out and is gone by the end of the week. I clearly remember her threatening to burn the house down as she left. 2 months later, she asked to move back in because her roommate and best friend kicked her out. Parents say no. She's on her own unless she wants to go to college and get a job and keep it. The car breaks down again, for good, and calls and asks parents if they can buy a new one for her. Not new as in new to her, new as in brand new model/year. My parents' newest car was 15 years old at the time. They say no and not to call again. There was a whole raft of other things too, including forgetting to pick up her grandmother from doctor's appointments, generally loathing the existence of the rest of the family, and then, ironically, deriding the family as rednecks when she finally managed to hook a guy who was a small business owner and actually had some money. Anywho, it's been about 20 years since I've spoken to her, and from the stuff I hear now and again through the pipeline, I'm better for it. I do expect her to come calling when my parents pass and she finds out I'm the sole heir. Another guy who genuinely creeps everyone out by jumping the fence and just standing in the backyard at all hours of the night? Your sister dated Michael Myers. Oh, definitely dated Michael Myers. That's really sad though. You can tell your parents really cared about her and wanted to help her out. Story 2. I'm not a parent. I've never disowned a child. My parents disowned my oldest sister. I'm the youngest of 3 girls. My oldest sister had a horrible relationship with my father, blames me for getting in the way of the relationship. She had her first baby to spite him when she was 16 years old. My father refused to give her money because she met a deadbeat child predator and got pregnant again and again and again. She constantly put herself and deadbeat before kids. Dad would send money to girls for Christmas and birthdays and never heard a thing. He finally gave up. She's 30, has 6 daughters, and lives in a mobile home in North Carolina. We hadn't seen or heard from my sister until June of this year. My oldest niece contacted me, asking to come to Florida, where I live, for the summer to get her and her sisters out of the trailer. I agree, contact my sister, and she agrees. I set up plane tickets and organized the rooms they'll stay in. When they got here, they were completely disheveled. Clothes visibly dirty, smelled foul, so covered with lice that my white towel stained gray from removing them. Ew. My niece informed me that they had been without water and electricity for 6 months. They live in a 2-bedroom mobile home. There are holes in the roof, bugs and rats everywhere. As a family, we decide the girls aren't going back to North Carolina. We tell my sister to come to my parents' house in Florida to get her life together and get back on her feet. She refused because Deadbeat is not invited. Ironically, she found out that Deadbeat is cheating on her. She confronts him and he kicks her out of the crud hole trailer. Deadbeat said, "I would rather be homeless than live with you." Sister now works for the dollar store and doesn't pull her weight with kids. At least the girls are safe now. Your oldest niece is a smart girl to contact you. You're a kind soul to agree and open your heart. Story 3. Another way round, my father has this incredibly stupid jerk as a wife. She is just terrible. She left him, owed me quite a bit of money, cheated on my father, and on and on. After 3 years of marriage, she's around 36 and my father's 50. He did everything for her, and she just made him miserable. But he kept going. When she left my father, he became really depressed, and I cared for him, hoping that he would get over the whole situation, etc. We even fought the whole divorce together. He got better and everything. I was really happy for him. Then came the day that he had no money left and she came back to my father. He told me about it and I was so angry that he didn't learn from the story before. I told him that I don't want him to ever see her again and won't do anything with him if she's there as well. The day came when my father and I wanted to meet for lunch. As I arrived, I saw her sitting there with him. I went to the place and said that she had to leave or I'm gonna leave. He became mad at me for that and I left. He tried to do the same move again. I told him to frick off and never spoke to him again. I never trusted this woman. It became better, and then I found out about her cheating, lying, and everything. She told me to frick off when I wanted my money back. I won't trust her ever again, but I can't help my dad. I told him everything, and he's still blind through those love curtains. Sounds like my dad. He'll stick up for my narcissistic mother until he's blue in the face. I went no contact with her, but I told him that he could come up and visit me and his, at the time newborn, granddaughter anytime he wanted. Nope, I wouldn't do it without mom. It eventually got to the point where it became a lost cause, and I realized we'll never have a relationship as long as mom is alive. Story 4. Not me, but my great-grandma. This story is really sad, but also interesting, so I thought I'd share it. She was a young Creole teenager. French Creole was her first language, and she was a quarter to half black like me, with tan skin and loose brown curls. She was born in Florida, but when things started getting worse for black people in Florida, her family relocated to Texas. For those who don't know, Creole people tend to play heavily into colorism. Although they are definitely mixed race, they prioritize light-skinned people. The looser your curl, the lighter your skin. The more white you look, the better. Her parents had high expectations for her to marry a wealthy light-skinned man who would take care of her. Instead, she met my great-grandfather, a poor, dark-skinned man jumping from job to job working for farmers and trying to make a living. The two of them fell in love. They were just teenagers. Her parents threatened to disown her if she continued seeing him, and like a rebellious teenager, she refused. They wanted her to do better. She wanted to be in love. They might have broken up eventually, if she didn't get pregnant, but she did, and that was the end of it. Her parents basically said, "You've ruined your life," and disowned her right there. The whole family disowned her. No one would speak to her. Aunts, uncles, cousins, not a single person stood up for her. She had no choice. The two then moved to California so she could get a job picking oranges. He built a house. They had their first daughter. She was 16. She never saw her family again. I just can't imagine ever disowning my child just because they were happy in a way I didn't like. Like, yeah, I get wanting the best for your kid, but obviously he was the best for her. That's just so sad. Story 5. My parents disowned my oldest sister. She always struggled growing up more than us. She became a teen mom with a bad older dude, partied a lot, etc. But my parents helped her a lot. They do okay for themselves, but had a no co-signing rule for all 6 of my siblings and I. Still, they co-signed for a house so she could get a head start. She didn't pay the mortgage for almost 3 years before my mom got served in front of all the other nurses at her work. My parents worked tirelessly to try and work out deals where my sister and her family kept the house, and got some leniency, but to no avail because my sister never showed up for court dates. During this time, she got paid $12K for IVF and got pregnant with her 5th kid. When my mom demanded some of the money back, she accused my dad and my brother of beating her sons when their parents took them to Disney World. He didn't, and she said she'd file a police report if he asked for money again. They kept asking because it wasn't true. She awkwardly joined us for Christmas and punched my brother in the face during the meal for humiliating her oldest son by asking him if he wanted to work at my brother's company for good pay. Her oldest son is in and out of jail, and my brother was trying to help him after his release. But her son said he didn't want a job and got mad. She then called the cops and told them the same brother had illegal guns in his truck, and they came on Christmas night and searched his truck. No guns found. Needless to say, she is not welcome anywhere near any of us, and my mom still cries about it, but refuses to talk to her again. My heart actually aches for your mom. Story 6. I wouldn't say I've disowned or stopped loving my son, but it's really tough to find love for him. He's almost 14, next month, and he's currently out of our home at a treatment facility. He's averaged 2 arrests a year for the last 2 years, and he's attacked my wife several times, our daughter several times, and the neighborhood kids several times. He ran away from school, ran away from home, and tried to push me off the roof of our house, after threatening to jump off and hurt himself. We've become that family in our town where the police are called to our house on a semi-regular basis. He's been getting more violent as he gets older, not to mention bigger and stronger, and I honestly don't see an end in sight. The key fact I'm leaving out is that he's been diagnosed as high-functioning autistic and is also bipolar. That's like putting walls around a tornado and expecting it to stay inside the walls. A lot of what has occurred he has little control over because of the way his mind is, where he's constantly at war with himself. Structure versus chaos. And my wife and I have tried desperately to give him the best life we can while keeping ourselves and our daughter safe. But I'm tired. It's been 8.5 years we've been going through this with him, and I've been ready to throw in the towel on him for a while, but my wife refuses to let him go. So we wake up every morning trying to give him the best life for him and our girls. My brother has the same combo and was in a similar situation at that age. He's 10 years older now and studying for a PhD and engaged to a wonderful woman. I'm not promising that it will get better, but it can. I've seen it happen. Feel free to message me if you want to talk more. Story 7. Do adopted kids count? We adopted a 3-year-old from foster care. Cutest, sweetest kid. He had a few issues, but we mostly figured it was because of his history. The issues escalated quickly. When he was 7, he hit our dog with a golf club. Aw, poor dog. We had to keep him away from our dog and our cat. The cat disappeared. We assumed she got out and ran away. Found out years later that he killed it and threw it in the woods. The last straw was when he burned our house down. We sent him to a residential treatment center where he stayed for 2 years. During that time, he molested a roommate and became extremely violent. The insurance company told us that they wouldn't pay any more, and we'd either have to pay for him out of pocket, $40K a month, or bring him home. We have younger children and it wouldn't be safe. We ended up telling the state we wouldn't bring him home. So now we have a verified abuse report against us because we wouldn't bring him back, even though the therapist agreed with our decision. I don't love him. I wish the best for him, but I don't feel anything toward him. I'm just so sorry, internet stranger. I cannot imagine how much pain you have gone through. I hope your family is well and that you know you did the very best you could. I don't know you, but for some reason your story really moved me. And I'm just so sorry you went through this. Wishing you and your family peaceful times ahead. Story 8. My mother and her sister were adopted into a great family. Recently, my grandfather fell ill and we were told to prepare to say goodbye, so the family gathered. My grandmother has had a hard time with her memory since she's had a brain hemorrhage, but she welcomed my aunt into her home during this rough time. Whilst my grandfather was in his final week, Wendy, aunt, took my grandmother's ATM card and proceeded to spend well over $1,000 on herself and get herself a motel room. She also attempted to steal their car. When my uncles found out, she basically disappeared into the wind. After my grandfather passed and his funeral was all sorted, my grandmother went to an attorney to write Wendy out of any inheritance she would have got from the estate when she passed. She didn't press any formal charges because the whole process would have been lengthy and more painful for her. She didn't need the extra stress. I'm pretty sure one of my uncles also threatened Wendy to make sure she stayed away from my grandmother from now on too. Dang, that's some r/I'm a total piece of poop material from Wendy right there. Story 9. Drugs, violence, theft, repeatedly trying to destroy his younger brother, becoming a danger to myself and others, mental health issues that he refuses to deal with any longer or take his meds for anymore. Just plain off-the-chain behavior that was too much for all of us. I wouldn't call it disowning as much as putting down boundaries and setting up fences to protect people who didn't deserve his treatment. He also tends to be very manipulative and leans towards narcissistic behavior, in that he will habitually lie to you about others and try to play the victim. This can be very damaging to relationships with people that don't understand what's going on, so I'd rather just not bring myself into the equation anymore, because it's too costly and it's not worth it. He lacks empathy and doesn't know how to stop himself from his harmful behavior due to a developmental disability. Although he will also admit that he knows what he's doing and he knows that he's manipulative and playing games at times. When he was younger and was under the rules of being a minor, then he had all the help in the world and it was easier to deal with. That is just terrible. I'm so sorry. I hope you're doing well and that he can get some real lasting help. Story 10. As Jehovah's Witnesses, my parents disowned my siblings and I several times since I was in my late teens. One of the JW rules is that you do not associate with others who know the truth but refuse to follow it, including family, and parents are encouraged to disown any children who have left the religion. The first time when I was 19, it upset me. I was heartbroken, and eventually they changed their minds, only to do it again a couple years later. And so on until I stopped caring and no longer attempt to be part of their lives at all. Was seeing a girl in high school. Her family was JW, but she didn't really care. I really liked her and it was fun. Then she disappeared. Her dad found out and she was sent to live with her grandmother, never to see her again. Her sister managed to let me know what happened and that the girl was sorry. Really bummed me out for a couple of years. Story 11. My parents didn't disown me, it was just a weird mistake. My mother never wanted a child. She bailed out after a few months. My father was a single parent and ended up in prison, life without parole, when I was 14. I finally met my mother. She was a police detective by the time I moved in with her. She threw me out after 2 months. I'm 30 now, and life is typically a little weird around the holidays. But I always get a good laugh when I tell people that my father is in prison for life and my mother is a cop. But then they get super awkward when I tell them that, no, it's not a joke. It took a long time for me to come to terms with it, but I now know that none of it was my fault. Edit, this blew up way more than I expected. Thanks for all the kind words, everybody. I'm sorry, just generally. Story 12. I have been legally disowned by my father. When I was 11, my mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer. This was her second diagnosis in around 4 years. Obviously, she recovered the first time after intense surgery and a lot of chemo, and he did not want to look after her like he did before. He also had a new girlfriend and her family to look after apparently, and he had no issues leaving us. When my mom passed away when I was 14, my brother, grandfather, him and I met to discuss who I was going to live with. The plan was my brother and his family. Father was never considered, and he showed up and declared that he was in the process of going to court to legally emancipate himself from me. He went out of his way to legally declare that I was no longer his child, just so that my brother, 22 years old with a wife and 2 young children already, struggling on one paycheck, couldn't seek child support. Needless to say, it's done coming only days after my mom's funeral. What a jerk. Hugs to you, peace to your mom. Story 13. A little different. I was disowned, but I deserved it. I was an addict and a mess for a long time. My mom couldn't keep bailing me out of trouble and watch me self-destruct anymore. I wasn't living at home. She came to see me one last time to tell me she was done, not to contact her. She would no longer have anything to do with me. She was in pieces. I can't imagine how hard it must have been for her. But it was the best thing she ever did for me. Once she cut me off, my rock bottom came hard and fast. After a little while of living on the streets and my addiction consuming me, I made my way to a detox center, got a few days clean under my belt, and never looked back. That was almost 15 years ago. After it was clean a little while, I contacted my mom, and little by little we built a relationship again. And now we're really close. I am forever grateful to my mom for letting me fall and letting me back into her life. That must have been so hard for both of you. Glad to finally have a happy ending though. Story 14. My mother simply didn't want kids, but never bothered to prevent all three of us from being different men. She tried to have my dad put in jail for abuse. Meanwhile, he was working 2 jobs to support us and would come home to a filthy house and my diaper completely loaded. She put all 3 of us in foster care. And luckily, my dad got me along with my other half-sisters. Dad got her, but the oldest of us spent 18 years of her life in foster care. I had last saw my mother when I was 6 because she had seen that my dad was successful and wanted to use him for money. He brought me to the park to meet her and she blatantly ignored me and instead was all over my dad. He was a smart man and realized this, and that's the last time I ever saw her. She never sent 1 birthday card or ever paid a dime of child support to my dad because she didn't want kids and wouldn't take any steps to prevent it 3 separate times. Congrats, Mom. You're the world's biggest POS. Story 15. Since it seemed to have widened a bit, a family torn apart. Based on an aunt and her niece, aunt starts signs of dementia at a relatively young age and is moved to an assisted living home. Niece, who bounces around jobs, gets hired to go visit her about once a week, take her out to the mall or on a walk in the park, whatever. Paid handsomely. We get an alert that aunt has a check bounce from her account that should have $5,000 in it. Niece has drained the account, proven beyond a doubt with receipts. Niece would take aunt to aunt's bank machine every Friday and withdraw $200, then fill her car with gas. Aunt can't drive. And charge us hours when she clearly didn't spend hours with aunt. Charge us claiming she took my aunt to appointments. There were no appointment. We can actually call the doctor, FYI. The family rift? For some bizarre reason, my niece's family took her side. How the heck did they take her side? There's gotta be more, right? Right? Story 16. Not the mom, just her 15-year-old daughter. Often, my mom used to say that I didn't love her. Each day it got worse and worse. The affirmations from her saying that started to get to me, and soon enough, I really did stop loving her. She's not an alcoholic, but there have been quite a few nights where she came home very intoxicated and said horrible things to my brother and me. She lies often. I've caught her stealing my money for her gambling addiction. She wastes $200, $300 weekly on lotto tickets. About 80% of the time, she's not even paying with her money. She is so irresponsible that she's been fired from around 6 jobs in the span of 2 years. I get called many horrible names daily by her. One major thing she does that bugs me is after her screaming session, she'll try to make it up to me. And when I don't reciprocate her affection, she blames our horrible relationship on me. Didn't want to make this super depressing, but I guess that escalated quickly. Don't worry, these have all been pretty dang depressing. Story 17. Not a parent, but my parents stopped loving me the moment I was disfellowshipped as a Jehovah's Witness, and I promptly knew nothing of how to live on my own at the time. But I had a decent job and survived. Kicked out, my brother stopped associating with them 2 years later and lives with me. And since they moved away, 1,500 miles away to be exact, it's easier to tell people that I'm an orphan or that I do not have parents. Cause it's hard to explain how they would stop loving or want to associate with their own son over some stupid cult rules. Story 18. I've disowned one of my siblings. Still have 5 other siblings. My sister is just a horrible person. She's the youngest of the 7, and she's been rotten since she was a teenager. She is much younger than the rest of us, so while the other 6 grew up together, she was almost like an only child. She treats everyone in her life like they're here to serve her needs. Some of the things she's put on our mother are truly horrible. I wouldn't give a crud if she disappeared forever. Treats everyone like they're here to serve her needs. Is she that Muffy jerk from Arthur? Story 19. My biological father divorced my mom and also his 3 kids, basically bouncing out of our lives and making it clear he wanted next to nothing to do with any of us when he left. Many years later, at my old sister's funeral, that he had the freaking gall to attend. I asked him why he did, and he said, "I thought it would be easier for everyone." He actually meant it was easier for him to run home to his wealthy family and enjoy a second adolescence while my single mother worked 2 jobs to feed 3 kids under 10, with 0 child support from him. Our fathers are 2 in the same. Crummy. Story 20. I asked my biological father at 28 why he never tried to see me after he and my mom got a divorce. He said he never wanted to try for any custody arrangement because that meant he would have to pay child support. So the fear of child support led him to stop talking to his 9-year-old. He's currently doing the same thing to my 2 younger half-sisters. Some people just really shouldn't be parents. Story 21. My father said my mother's issue was that she had too many children and it gave her some kind of brain fever, much like a dog that loses its mind after having too many puppies. My mother said my father felt trapped by me. He was planning to leave when it was just my 2 older brothers, and then my mother got pregnant with me and he felt obligated to stay. Now that I'm an adult with 2 kids myself, I think I realize that both of my parents are just extremely mentally ill and incapable of loving anyone, including themselves. Story 22. I'm not sure if this counts. I didn't disown him, but I went through a dissociate episode after some really intense trauma. And honestly, I couldn't feel any attachment and parental love that I had for my son. I tried not to show it and behave as normally as possible because he was a child at the time and couldn't possibly understand what I was going through. It was pretty disturbing to not be able to feel any sense of bond with him. I eventually got better, but I definitely did not feel what I, or most people would call love for him. I'm glad you got better. That is just so sad though. I'm so sorry. Story 23. Not the parent, but my mom ceased all contact with my much older half-brother from a different dad. He was a violent, angry addict, would steal from and beat up my grandparents and my mom. She finally had enough. He died this year, and it's the first time my mom had seen him since she cut him off 15-ish years ago. I now have my own kids, and I've always supported my mom's decision. That said, I feel so sorry for her, more so than when I was just her kid. I can't imagine ever reaching that point with my kids, and I'm sure she never did either. Story 24. My siblings and I have stopped interacting with my oldest brother. We found out that years earlier, he had molested at least 2 boys. He was an adult at the time. He showed no remorse and turned the story around to say that those boys were at fault. It was so disgusting to watch someone you grow up with treat people so poorly and show such a blatant disregard for others. The good news is that the remaining 4 siblings have become closer and we are now able to appreciate the good we see in each other. It's true when they say that if you could pick your family, it would look much different than it is. Story 25. My wife left me and took our son from me when he was 6 weeks old. I fought for over 5 years to see him, but in the end had to protect my own sanity. The feeling of that parental love turning into just a feeling of his existence is something you simply can't describe. Story 26. I'd love to hear my mother's explanation, although she hasn't contacted me for over 20 years, so I know that's not going to happen. I think you're more likely to get responses from the kids. Story 27. I love my son, but he abused me. When he turned that violence onto his sister by choking her, I had to say goodbye. That is so freaking sad. Oh my god. I really hope there's a happy end to the story that just hasn't been posted yet. Story 28. I hope my mom answers this one. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe for more videos to come, or else this spider will be in your bed tonight.